Welcome to Dr Joe Unplugged. This podcast contains general information and is not in any way medical advice. In the bizarro world of Australian health, the government is making it harder for people who smoke to give up smoking, or for those who've already quit successfully via vaping to stay off cigarettes. This is a subject that we've spoken about previously. Today, I'm happy to present an interview that I did recently with Mike Jeffries of Radio 2GB in Sydney, where we delve into some of these issues and particularly looking at the impacts of proposed legislation. Listen and enjoy.
It just got much harder to stop smoking. That's the claim. General practitioner Dr Joe Kostorich is on the line. Good morning, Dr Joe.
Good morning, Mike.
Vaping. So this is a push for vaping. Why?
Essentially, outside of Australia, which is an outlier, vaping is recognised for what it is, the world's most popular and successful and effective quit smoking method. So if you go to the UK, if you go to the EU, Japan, USA, Canada, all of these places, New Zealand, probably the closest to us and the best example, what they do is see that vaping, much like nicotine patches, gums and sprays that you can buy in the supermarket in all sorts of flavours, even on special, let alone not getting a prescription, just buy it at the supermarket, not even at a chemist, because it gets people off cigarettes. And so Australia is now making, and people have done this here as well, but they've had to do it illegally. So now it's not hard enough for Australians to give up smoking. The government wants to make it even harder for them to do that.
So I've been told in the past that I used to be a very heavy cigarette smoker way back, but that it's not the nicotine so much, it's the delivery method. All those, things that are in a cigarette that are bad for you and accumulate in your lungs.
Yeah.
You agree with that?
Mike, what you're told is absolutely correct. Yeah. Nicotine of itself is not a carcinogen, because if it was, as I said before, you wouldn't be able to buy it at the supermarket in patches, sprays and gums.
Right.
It is the burning or the combustion of tobacco that liberates, I've given to understand it's well over 1,000 different chemicals, and that includes arsenic, formaldehyde. That is what the problem is in terms of cigarettes causing cancer. People may like nicotine. Some people prefer alcohol. People have got their own preferences, and I'm not going to enter into the rights or wrongs of that. But nicotine of itself is not what kills people. I think back in the 60s, Michael Russell, who was a famous psychiatrist, said, basically people come for the nicotine. They don't come because they want to die. But the delivery method can kill them. We now have alternative delivery mechanisms.
So we have a curious situation, as I understand it. I mean, I don't vape. I can't think of anybody I know who does. But as I understand it, if you want to get the ingredients, you can get it, even if it's not strictly legal to do so.
Since October 2021, the previous Health Minister, Greg Hunt, introduced a regime whereby to vape legally, you needed a prescription from a doctor. You could use that prescription to import nicotine liquid into Australia. So it was a prescription, but it effectively worked as a licence. Now, prior to that, people could just do it anyway. Now, it's been estimated that the vast majority of vapers, and depending who you talk to, that numbers could be anywhere between 600,000 and 1 million. Probably 98% of those people didn't have a prescription, and they just took the risk and imported it illegally, and vast majority got away with it. That has now been made illegal. So it's already illegal to do it without a prescription. Now it's illegal to even do it with a prescription, and they're claiming that border forces will intercept all these packets of nicotine liquid. Well, they haven't done it in the last 2 and a bit years, and apart from a few displays for the media, they're not going to do it now. People can get a prescription from the doctor, go to the chemist and get a form of vape that is manufactured typically by companies either that are large pharmaceutical companies or, believe it or not, and this is what's absolutely crazy, big tobacco companies, whereas most of the imports from New Zealand are not from big tobacco companies, they're from small retailers. But the worst aspect of all of this, Mike, is that you don't need a prescription to get cigarettes.
Right.
And we're already seeing reports, and yes, they might be anecdotal, but it doesn't stop them being true, of people saying, this is all just too hard, I'm going to go back to smoking. And then we've also got the issue of black market tobacco trade, and there have been a number, particularly in Melbourne, of fire bombings and tobacconists. There's a lot of black market activity. None of this happens in New Zealand. It doesn't happen in the UK. It doesn't happen in all of these other countries. They've all got it right. We've got it completely wrong. And not only have we got it wrong, we're making it worse.
So what do you think should be done? What do you want to see happen?
Yeah. Look, we need to adopt the New Zealand model, which is a system where vaping is legalised, regulated. You have manufacturing standards. It's not for sale to children, a bit like alcohol. It's not advertised. And adults can vape in much the same way that adults can drink. The model that New Zealand has adopted has been remarkably successful in terms of reducing their smoking rates. They've gone much, much faster than we have. And for anybody who's been over there, you really look around and see that their system works. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just need to adopt their model. Legal, regulated system, proportionate taxation, no advertising, for sale to adults only, only in venues that have a licence to sell them. A very simple, straightforward model can be lifted right across the Tasman.
So that's their model with vaping. As I understand it, they backed off from an idea where by degrees of age group, you would no longer be able to buy cigarettes at all.
Yeah, and ultimately, again, prohibition never really has been shown to work, and we saw that going back to America in the 1920s with alcohol. But the way in which smoking rates are falling in New Zealand, they won't really need to, because most people don't particularly have a death wish. If they can access nicotine in a far safer form, they will do that. Now, maybe some people won't, but the way you eliminate smoking is by giving people a better alternative for those people who, as has been the case for hundreds and possibly thousands of years in human history, use or get some pleasure out of nicotine. You provide them with better options, and in the vast majority, they will take that. You then really don't have a need to ban cigarettes because there just won't be a demand for them.
What about the allegation it's a gateway drug? Young kids are going to use it and then, turn to other drugs. I guess most immediately cigarettes would be the argument.
And as has been shown in the UK, that is not the case because youth smoking is falling. They've been ahead of the curve in terms of how they've dealt with vaping over the years. Even in Australia, and we've heard this moral panic about youth vaping. And what we've seen is, yes, teenagers experiment with vaping, cigarettes, with alcohol, with a whole lot of other substances. In an ideal world, they wouldn't, but we don't live in an ideal world. But youth smoking rates, and this was the most recent AIHW data, that's the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare, that came out last week, showed that smoking in Australia is continuing to fall, even though roughly 2% or somewhere between 2 and 3% of teenagers are regular vapers, not including people who vaped a couple of times or might do it once a month. So smoking rates in youth are falling, which also says that these kids would rather, if they have to do something, go with the vapes and with the smokes, but they're doing it, again, in very small numbers, and it is absolutely a gateway out of smoking, not into smoking.
Well, on that note, appreciate your time and comments. Thank you, Dr. Joe Unplugged.
Mike, you're very welcome.
Thanks for listening to Dr. Joe Unplugged. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, like and share. You can also follow it on all the socials. There'll be new content uploaded each week.